Thank you, everybody. My name is Barton. With me is Dr. Jung Kim. We are with DXC Technology. Appreciate you being here with us this morning to talk about enabling analytics. When we were working with your peers in the advisory group, some of the main questions that were asked of us is not so much about what are the tools to use for analytics, but how do you go about enabling analytics in an organization? How do you get started? How do you create that mental model and that paradigm shift of how to use the data? So that's what our focus is going to be on this morning, of how do you really get the enterprise to use the data. It's one thing to create analytics, it's a different story than to act upon those analytics and use that in your decision making and policy making, etc. So we'll go through, I'm going to give you a very quick introduction of who DXC is. A lot of people might not have heard of our name. It's a very new name, so we'll spend one slide on that in a quick few minutes just to set some context there. Then Jung will come up and talk to us about defining analytics, how to create an enablement framework for analytics, and then we'll get into operationalizing analytics and then round it out with some Q&A. So many of you might not have heard of who DXC Technology is. DXC Technology was a very new company formed April 1 from the merger of HP Enterprise Services and CSC. So from one standpoint, we're a couple months old. From another standpoint, we are 60 years old, starting with EDS and creating the very first outsourcing industry with Ross Perot as our leader. CSC and HP Enterprise Services together as DXC Technology is the #1 independent full-service IT services organization in the globe. And the important statement there is independent. So we are no longer owned by a hardware firm or a software firm. We do not make our decisions based on how to sell our product. We are independent, so we bring the right solutions to our client, and we have a partner network that allows us to bring all of those right solutions to our clients. So for example, many might not know, we are the #1 managed service provider of AWS services. So we are one of the very few strategic partners that have certified in AWS. We have the largest number of resources who are certified in AWS technologies and helping clients move to the cloud. We're also the largest firm of consultants that help people move to ServiceNow, as another example of the breadth and depth of the capabilities that we bring now that we have merged the two companies together. So happy to talk more about DXC Technology if anybody wants to know more. There's 6 of us floating around. We have 3 in the room. If you'd quickly raise your hand so people know who's here. If you see any of us around, please stop and ask us questions about analytics or about DXC Technology. But we want to get to why we're here. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kim again, who will take us through the presentation. Feel free to ask questions. Let's have this be a dialogue. Let's make sure we're answering the questions you're seeking answers for. So please, let us know. We're happy to go wherever the crowd would like us to go to make sure that we're answering the questions that are top of mind for you. Dr. Kim.
All right. Thank you, Brad. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. My name is Jung Kim. By the way, Brad, you just helped me to realize that I really like the sound of Jung. I realized that I'm not really used to hearing Dr. Kim. So thank you for calling me Jung. We'll stay with that. So introduction slide. Simply put, I like to try and share some stories with you today with real-world experiences and anecdotes. If you are interested, you can download our slides and you can read a lot more about the details of technology and the theories from our slides later. But for now, I like to stay with stories. Now, to start out with, analytics defined. The way I define somewhat academically, analytics is data management and data processing practice, where the objectives are to present an accurate view of your enterprise data and to derive previously unknown patterns in the tons of data that you have in your organization. And both of these, namely the accurate view of your data and the previously unknown insights, should contribute to your business value. And that's why the business highly regards analytics. So having defined the analytics in that way, most organizations I come in contact with nowadays wish to become a data-driven, agile organizations, and most recently powered by analytics. What does that mean? So a data-driven, agile enterprise would be where enabled and skilled workforce can deal with innovations and insights and take advantage of them. And in order for that to happen, the organization would need to have the right platforms in the form of organizational design, governance model, and the right technology platforms. All these things need to come together for an organization to become data-driven and agile. Now, why is that important nowadays? I think this graphics succinctly shows the challenges that most organizations face today. We heard a lot of good points in our opening remark today as well from the Accenture talk. So the bottom line is the amount of data that we need to deal with is exponentially growing. But because of the competition, the time we have to deal with the increasing data is shrinking. So this widening gap here will represent the challenge that we are facing, simply put. I thought it was very interesting that the author of this graphics went from kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, and just didn't bother with terabytes at all. He or she just jumped to zettabytes, which just simply goes to illustrate how fast the data is growing. Big challenge. So again, even if we have the analytics definition as previously defined, what does it really mean? What does analytics really mean? Different people tend to have slightly different views. For some people, it means the process of analyzing data, analyzing information in order to learn something. For others, it usually means, oh, I've got these reporting and BI tools. Let's apply this breadth of capabilities and produce something. And most lately, analytics came to mean applying some kind of mathematical or statistical techniques to build a model and to derive some kind of insights from your data. Now, these are all good. There is no one right definition and any wrong definitions. These are all good. But we came to realize that in many organizations, there are barriers in existence that are actually preventing the fluid motion from data to processing to insights and business value. So how do we go about doing something about this situation so that we can properly enable the analytics in your organization? So as another attempt, usually when you ask two people, what does analytics mean? What does business intelligence mean? What does analytics mean? You tend to get about 3-4 different answers. So we try to illustrate using some concrete examples. So what this table is trying to show you is analytics can range from traditional reporting to more advanced form of business intelligence. Then we go a little bit more and we can deal with advanced analytics. So an example of business intelligence, this is where you typically have data warehouse, data marts, and so on. And you deal with a lot of transactional data in rigidly designed tables. And you tend to generate reports that report on the summary data, counting, and as a result, the view tends to be somewhat real looking. So what happened? How much inventory do I have? How many applications did I get? So it tends to be a somewhat real view, whereas advanced analytics tends to be a bit more forward-looking. Okay, what happened is important, but I like to know what is happening now, what is likely to happen tomorrow, what might happen tomorrow. And ideally, with some understanding of why, what's causing it, what's driving this new trend that we didn't know before. In order to accomplish that goal, we tend to use not only structured data, that is transactional data from your enterprise systems, but also employ unstructured data, documents from your office systems. Nowadays, we get a lot of data from social media, and a really advanced form of advanced analytics would employ speech recognition as well as video processing. So the diversity of data increases quite a bit. So examples of BI and advanced analytics. Now, so at this point, I'd like to talk about analytics enablement framework. I've been in technology for a while, and each and every technology tends to come with this intoxicating promise of simplicity. And it's a beautiful vision, and I think that's great. However, so as an example, I love using the latest visualization tools. Now, visualization tool vendor would typically have you believe that by our tool, point it to your data, and magic happens. What I'd like to share with you today is this is what needs to happen underneath the magic so that you can experience the magic. So let me just spend a minute here. So this, at very high level, shows the different phases that any successful analytics project or endeavor will have to go through. And this actually covers both the traditional reporting and the advanced analytics that we just compared and contrast. First, as always, we start with business understanding, right? So what business problem are we trying to solve? What pains are we feeling in our business? What changes are we trying to make in our business? And when I say business, it could mean both private sector, public sector, more business-oriented groups, or IT groups, right? These are all our businesses. So it starts with business understanding, and this is where your business analyst or researchers will spend the most of the time and play the greatest role. After that, once we understand what business problem we are trying to solve, obviously we want to make sure we want to be data-driven, agile enterprise. So as a next step, we would like to make sure that we have the right data. Once we get the data, and I'll come back to some more details of that in a moment, we want to profile the data just to get a feel for, okay, how much data do I really have? Are they any good? And just in broad stroke, what does my data telling me about my business? So it's a fairly quick process, data profiling. Based on that, once you have a feel for your data, you want to design your data so that you can ask the business questions that you like to ask. And in a traditional business intelligence, if you will, this is where you spend a lot of time working with concepts that should be familiar to you, such as ETL, table design, and model constructions and so on. So this is where you spend a lot of time there. Now in advanced analytics, and by the way, in contrast, one of the advantages that the modern technologies of advanced analytics enables us to do is really accelerate the data profiling and the data design phases. So it is no longer 3 to 6 months from the time you get your new report request until you can deliver your report. While we are trying to deal with the weekend sales in private sectors and the rapidly changing regulatory and political climates in our public sector, just waiting for a new report for 6 months just doesn't work. We would like to shorten the time, more like 1 to 2 weeks. So that's the goal here. So that once you get a good feel for data, your data, and you have a good design, the first thing we recommend is explore your data. Because the fact of the matter is there will be a lot of trials. You set out with a simple vision, a clear vision, but there will be a lot of stop and go, trial and errors, coming back to redesign, coming back to reprofile your data, and coming back to your business. Is this what you really wanted to know? Your data doesn't quite support that hypothesis. How about we try something different? So there will be a lot of iterations, trial and errors, and a lot of stop and goes. So the first thing we recommend is you explore your data. And typically what happens that we've seen is if you have the right team and give them the right tool and adequate data, by just looking at your own data for about a day, if it is really complicated, massive amount of data, it might take a week or two, but just look at your data using the tools. Explore the data. Look at it from different angles. Don't just focus on what is this column, what is the sum of the values, but just let it loose and explore your data. In about a day, you'll be amazed how many insights you can get about your own data that you didn't know about before. So that's a good start, data exploration. And then from there, once you understand what kind of independent variables that you could possibly have in your data, what kind of response variable that you are looking for based on your business understanding, that's when you start constructing your model. So here, in comparison to traditional BI, this is where you explore various decision models, predictive models, and other forms of statistical models. And again, it is not one size fits all where one statistical model will do the magic for you all the time. So depending on what kind of business problem you're trying to solve and what the quality and quantity of your data are, you may have to try several different models until you find one that works best for you. So again, a lot of trial and error and iterations. Now, so this is where your data scientist or DBAs or a technical analyst will spend a lot of time finding a solution for you, and this is where the data scientists do the heavy lifting as the foundation of the magic that we see as the end user and in beautiful visualizations. After that, one thing I like to emphasize at this point is oftentimes we tend to forget the evaluation and deployment aspect. As soon as we get a model that shows interesting results, everybody gets excited. But I like to emphasize two things. One, evaluation. I cannot emphasize enough how much we need to test, and validate our models and the results that they are producing. Now, in business world, business reports are very important because they show how much inventory we have, how much money we are spending and bringing in, and what kind of experience our customers are reporting. Accurate reporting is important. Great. In advanced analytics, we are producing different kinds of reports that just doesn't tell us what we have today, but what might happen tomorrow. And these are the kinds of policy level predictions that could influence hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars in program budget, funding, and that can actually touch people's lives. Right? So validate, 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 extremely important. Now, there was an interesting anecdote recently. Back in late February, early March of this year, one of my data scientists constructed an interesting model and ran a report on the number of CalFresh or food stamp applications. And the result was quite striking. From November of 2016 to February 2017, there's a huge drop. Intrigued, the data scientists looked into further, and there was an even steeper drop among non-citizen recipients. Citizen recipients were relatively okay. Great insight. So we are about to report on the findings. When the data scientists happened to find out that in January, a new rule was introduced in CalFresh program that changed the data. And so while the initial intuition was the drop in CalFresh applications or the renewals in January and February of this year was due to the changing political climate, that is the so-called fear factors, if you will, among non-citizens and possibly undocumented recipients. It turned out not to be true. It was just regulation change. So it is extremely important for the data scientist to be aware of the changing regulations, changes in systems and data, and validate the results. It is a good thing that we didn't go public with that finding. It would have been rather embarrassing.